orchestral rehearsals. But now I have this time off, it was like, okay, I've been meaning to do all these projects with my playing. I've been meaning to do a project with transcriptions of Baroque music, and I haven't really like had any direction or known where to go. So I feel like mentorship is really an important part of my story. So I have a really great mentor with Eric Ross. I'm going to set my horn down for a second, if I'm not going to play. So Eric has done a lot of transcriptions. He did a classical transcription CD where he transcribed like Mozart and Schumann, and then he did another one where it was like all sorts of crazy technical stuff, like virtuoso horn stuff. And then, yeah, Eric has also like, done all the standard recordings of Mozart and Strauss and Glier. So, and then of course the Bach transcriptions, like just him doing transcriptions of solo horn stuff. And he's always been bugging me, hey, like you should do a Baroque album. And I just didn't know where to start. And so I called him up and I said, hey, like, I've got this time off and what do I do? And he's just like, so it's your time to find some transcriptions. And I said, well, where do I start? He said, just start playing through stuff. So we've got this gift of like time. We also have the gift of like information. Like anything is available to us online at like a second. So I can go to IMSLP and pull up a score for the Bach partitas and sonatas, the Bach inventions, or like what you name it. So there have been a couple of pieces that I've wanted to check out, and I was wondering if it was possible for me to do on the horn, such as the Strauss Sonata for violin. And that's, that's something that's kind of in the back of my mind. It's like, okay, this would be a really great piece to play on the horn, but how am I going to make this work for the horn? And then, so I played through it and I listened to a flute transcription and I was like, okay, maybe this is something that could work on the horn. And so that was my first week, like listening to like other transcriptions, like flute transcriptions, oboe transcriptions, trumpet transcriptions. And then I just Google searched like things that I thought were cool. Like I was like, all right, Baroque recorder music. And so I started like going down this rabbit hole of like, who are some Baroque composers? And I started finding, okay, Albinoni. I also found, Vivaldi. I found Telemann. I found Handel, and then of course, Bach. And so I started looking there. And then once there's a lot of pieces for me that I don't know. It's like repertoire that's kind of like, it's the Wild West of music for me, really. So I started saying, okay, like which instruments are like kind of easy for the horn to play. And I find that oboe and horn kind of work well. So I can take an oboe piece, an oboe concerto, and I can play that on horn without too much problems. It's a wind instrument. It doesn't have, it's got virtuosity with the keys, but so I started listening to some Baroque oboe playing on Brechtmeyer, and then I started kind of like delving into recorder music and finding some like recorder pieces that were really interesting for me, like the Telemann recorder sonatas and Telemann flute sonatas, and then I started getting into Handel, and Handel is like really, really fun for me. That's kind of like some of my favorite music, like Harmonious Blacksmith. That's a transcription that Eric did for horn and piano. So Handel was on my radar, and then I ended up just digging up some of these like flute sonatas, and I guess there are probably about 6 or 7 of them that I know of. And I just started kind of going in and like, all right, let's see if I can read this in the key of C. Like, okay, if that's not a good key, what if I read it down an octave? All right, now what if I take this note that's like, so I got really good at transposing in C, and I got, and it's funny because I transpose in C all the time in the orchestra, but they're usually parts that I know and they're horn parts, so they're a little bit more simple to play. But playing like flute music, you've got ledger ones. And then I started like really just saying, okay, which ones of these would I really be able to play? And then you find ones that like work, ones that stick, and meanwhile you're playing and you're pushing yourself in a register that you wouldn't think of. And yeah, it's like maybe not going to sound great right off the first try, but I can tell you that even like composers like Handel and Bach and composers like Telemann, the music that they wrote for horn isn't as great as some of the music they wrote for other instruments. So if I can take these pieces for other instruments and put them into my own, voice on the horn, then I think I actually have better music available to me, and it's more fun to play. So, I mean, like the Beethoven Sonata is like probably our biggest composer that wrote a piece for horn, and it doesn't really seem like it's that great of a piece. It's not that musically interesting, not that many harmonic changes, just because of the limitations of the instrument. So, yeah, finding these other pieces is really fun. And I mean, like, start small. Like, we all have access to the Bach two-chord inventions. So, like, read through those and try to record yourself, and then try to play along with the other part. And you can read those in F, right? I mean, I've got those here. And if we just take the Bach conventions, right? Just the regular old piano book. Sorry, it's going to be backwards maybe, but anyone can see that it's not too terribly, you don't go in the stratosphere. You don't go into, like ledger lines. So I'll just take this as an example of a transcription. And I can just basically pick up my horn and just play it as it is. And that's a version of doing a transcription. Right? So once we do that, now we can record it on an app like Acapella. And this is where the fun begins. It's like, okay, how do you play with yourself? How good is your time? And what do you bring out? What melody is like the interesting one? So here now the melody goes in the left hand. So, and now the melody goes back in the right hand, right? So it's really interesting for me to kind of see how that counterpoint works and how that structure. And another benefit of getting to play music that isn't written for horn is that I get to hear people that are much greater musicians than I am. I get to hear, if I'm like working on the Bach partitas, for example, and those are incredibly hard to play for me just because they have so many accidentals and key changes, and then I'm also reading it in C. But they're not, I mean, the transposition's not terribly hard. It's just remembering, like, okay, I gotta, carry this sharp over, and then now I'm in a different key. But I can work on it, and I work on it slowly, and I get that music into my ear and that music into my brain. And then I go back and I listen to someone like Heinrich Schering. And then I hear how he does note groupings. And I get to hear, oh, wow, this is where he takes time. This is where he sets up the harmony. This is how he sets up, this key change. And now all of a sudden, like, I'm getting a free music lesson, and I'm listening to this piece of music, which I've probably heard, many times before, but I'm hearing it in a completely different way. So it's like, I'm becoming my own teacher, and I'm using recordings, and I'm using like IMSLP, I'm using like iTunes and YouTube to teach me and to become a better musician and a better player.
Wow. So can you talk a little bit more about just that kind of external motivation of listening to these recordings, listening to people that are phenomenal musicians, and how you extract, like, teaching yourself from that? Because we're kind of all in this same situation where we can go listen to recordings of whatever, anybody playing any instrument, as you're saying, Albinoni recorder concertos are not something I often assign to horn students, but we can all benefit from it, right?
Yeah.
So like, I mean, how does that process work for you? What are you listening for, or how do you, you know, encapsulate that and then apply it to a practice session?
Huh. Okay, that's a really great question. So, I mean, it seems kind of abstract to listen to like a recorder concerto and then be like, I think I can do that on the horn. And for me, like, obviously, I can't do that right away. I can't just like listen to like yesterday I was listening to a Vivaldi recorder concerto. And then I was like, you know what? I want to try to play this on the horn. And it's like really fast and it's really high. But you know, I just know that for myself, okay, I'm not going to be able to play it that fast yet, and maybe have to take a couple notes down the octave. But I'm just kind of like listening, like, hey, is this something that I find interesting, or is it something, let's just try playing it and see what happens. And it's as I said, it's like this is the fun stuff. Like this is why I play music, is because I love listening to music, and I love like, okay, maybe this would work. This is like a new experiment. Like, let me see if I can like try this on the horn. Like, what if this is the first time this has ever been played on a horn before? Like, so again, it's like, the wild west of classical music. And really, there's no wrong thing to transpose or transcribe. It's just whatever you like to listen to. And a way that I've heard Canadian brass guys talk about the transcriptions, because they're big in transcribing for their ensemble, is that they listen to something that they like. And once they listen to something they like, they try to sing it. And if they can sing it, generally it'll work on a brass instrument. And then if they can sing it, then they're like, okay, now let me see if I can do something kind of interesting. Do like a jazzy take on it, or like throw in a pop, something like that, to make their own transcriptions or their own arrangements. For me, I'm just simply just trying to, go through this discovery right now. Like, what can I find for, music out there? What interests me? Obviously, there's just so much Bach. I mean, there's just like thousands of pieces of Bach, so I don't think I'll ever get, through that whole category in my whole, in my whole life. And then, of course, there's tons of Mozart. There are Mozart clarinet concertos and flute concertos, and so I just want to like discover, right, what about this, and how can I play this? So, what can I learn from listening to another instrumentalist take on this, and how would this transfer to the horn? So I'm listening to phrasing, like which note are they leading to, like which note in that line is most important. Where do the other musicians take? Where do they start a new phrase? How is the tone kind of engaging? How is the tone, capturing my imagination? And what are they trying to say? And how can I say that in my own words best? But again, it's not complicated. Like everyone can play the second Bach invention. Right? I'm sure it's in one of the, the beginner horn duet books. Right? And then you can even play that in the key of F. You don't have to transpose it even in the key of C. So record that on Zoom or on a cappella, and do it with a click track, and then like send it to your friend. And then like, because we can't play together, we can at least, in person, we can at least play some of these pieces and like get something out of it. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. It's just, I love to play the horn, and I'm just trying to find new fun things to play. And like, hey, how could I share this with somebody else? And at the end of my practice session, I'll usually like try to record 30 seconds of my practice and try to share it with my friends, or try to share it with my teacher, or try to share it up on Instagram if I really like it. I did like I can share a couple of those with you, but I did a Bach Brandenburg concerto, one of the ones for the two violas. So, it's, and so I ended up doing some of those, just like the very last page of it, I found a arrangement online for 2 bass oboes. And so like I could play that in F, like just read the bass oboe part. And then, I kind of had to get it on my fingers, but once I got it on my fingers, then I was like, okay, let me like send this to somebody. And I put it up on Instagram, and then they shared it with somebody. And, it was just kind of fun. I was like, hey, name that tune. And, some people could say, oh yeah, that's Bach, or oh, I can't name that tune, but I recognize it. Or it was just something I could do to kind of engage with my friends.
Oh. You said you love the horn. We're all horn players here. I mean, you play the horn for a living. It's in your hands probably as much as it's in anybody's hands, right? So how do you, like, why do you love it? And how do you keep that love, like, going every day?
Okay, so I love the horn because, number one, the sound, right? We've got this sound that's like no other instrument in the orchestra. It's pure, it's clear, it's warm, it's malleable. It's just the best sound in the orchestra for me. So I love it, and it's my voice. Like, what I mean by it's my voice is like I've figured out like how to make feelings that I feel come out with that sound and express that. So when you can express, like, so that's the reason we do coproche. That's the reason we do scales. That's the reason why we do warm-ups, is so we get this technical facility so that now all of a sudden, like, it's our vocabulary. It's like learning a language. Like, so imagine that, like, I go to Mexico, for instance, and I want to communicate with people. Like, and I'm just like, man, there's this, this guy I really, like, I see him at the market every day, and I really want to talk to him, but I just don't have that vocabulary. So every day I learn a little bit more, and I learn how to say, how are you? I learn to ask, what's your day like? And then pretty soon I can, like, start to talk about the weather, and then I can talk about the football team and the score, right? So now I'm expressing myself, and I'm engaging with this person who I really like and who likes me, and it's just like this fun dialogue. And so I'm motivated to learn Spanish, and then I start learning the grammar, and then I start learning, like, just like different things. And, I ask him about his family. Same thing with the horn. It's just a language, right? Music's a language. So I have to get familiar in the grammar, which is, coproche and scales. And then I have to get, familiar with vocabulary, scales and arpeggios. And then I have to, like, practice that vocabulary. So I have to be fluent, to practice speaking in that language. And then once I have that ability, now I can express myself. And there's no greater joy for me than communicating with people and expressing that. So I think when we look at the horn, sometimes we look at it as like, this is an instrument and I'm trying to learn a skill. And it's like, okay, that's one way to look at it. But for me, I think it goes a level beyond. It's just like, no, this is a language. We're learning a language, and we're learning just another way to express ourselves. And honestly, I love sharing. Like, I feel like I go and I do these discoveries, or I go do these things, and I'm like so excited about what I discovered. I want to share that with somebody else. And I find that when I share what I've discovered or what I'm thinking about, then they can come back with different ideas, and they can help me, and we become greater together than we could be singular, right? So, like, the group, right? The group wisdom, the collective knowledge is greater than the individual. The sum of the parts are greater than the part itself. So that's what I think of, and it's like, once now I've got this horn where I love the sound, and it's a challenge, right? It's like, it's never boring. Like, and I'm sure people find the same thing when they have, like, a drum, like, they'll find ways to make that really interesting, like a single snare drum, or someone and that's their voice, and that's something that engages them, or someone loves to play the bass, and that's their voice, and they become a really great bass player. But for me, my voice just happened to be the horn. And I think that's true for most of us. That's why we decided to pursue it. And so now, like, it's my job to get, number one, fluent in the grammar and fluent in the language. And then it's my job to figure out what I want to say and how I want to say it. And then it's also my job now to share that. And so I just get really excited about figuring out, all right, what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? Where am I going to say it? You know, and then just figuring out different ways to approach that. Because, you know, it's like Shakespeare, right? We've got the same Shakespeare play. It's been performed for over 500 years, right? Or all close to 500 years. But still, like, those same words, like Romeo, Romeo, where art thou, Romeo? Or, you know, where it, you know, Hamlet, to be or not to be. Everyone knows those quotes. And why are they so famous is because they've been said thousands of times, you know, and you still don't get tired of hearing them because they're part of a story, and every time they're said differently, but it still relates to us today, relates to our feelings, experiences.
Can I ask a question, kind of follow up on that? Like, the idea of, like, you know, you're playing music every week in the orchestra that everybody knows, and you're doing it on a pretty prominent stage every week or every time you perform. You know, you're playing Tchaikovsky 5 or, you know, something like that you know, every horn player knows, and everyone in the orchestra knows your solo as well as you do, and half the audience does as well. How do you try and approach that with fresh eyes, with, like, I mean, with your own interpretation in an environment where you're playing stuff everybody already knows?
Well, all right, so again, it's like chess, right? Like, everyone knows the game of chess, or a lot of people know the game of chess, but why do people play it? It's because every game is different. So, like, we have over 60 people on stage at one time, and every time, like, who knows? This person might have had something, a new discovery, or while they were practicing, they're like, man, I really want to emphasize this note. And every time we do it, it could be with a different conductor, and then the conductor could, you know, just feel the music differently from night to night. So what happens is I'm in the orchestra and I hear these beautiful sounds around me, and it's my job to come to orchestra extremely prepared. So, like, knowing what my role is, am I melody, am I harmony, am I solo, right? Am I 2D, right? Like, so those, I have to know my role, and, like, and then who I'm playing with, and I have to know what key I'm playing in. So that's my homework. So it's just like knowing, like, again, I'm gonna liken this to acting. So you know the scene, right? You know who your character is. You know if you're the protagonist or the antagonist, or, like, you know, like, what if you're the good guy, the bad guy, the villain, whatever, right? So you know that, and even and is this character in this role now, is this character having an introspective moment, or are they, like, you know, interacting with somebody else? So if I can really get inside my character, right, my voice in that part, and then I'm really actively listening. So I'm listening all around me, and I'm hearing someone do something, and then, you know, whenever I play a line in the orchestra, I usually don't have it first. It usually happens somewhere else around me. So they'll play a line, and then I listen to it, and I listen to their phrasing, and I'm trying to do so much of what they did that I can kind of lose myself in that, and I'm listening to the other parts around me while I'm playing, right? So I'm listening to that second bassoon line, that second oboe line, that second flute line, or the viola line, you know, one of those inner harmonies. And I'm, like, really trying to get into their sound and become part of this whole. Even when I have a solo, I'm, like, going back, like, you know, Brahms 2, I'm listening to that bass line. I'm listening to, like, where the harmony is going, where it's changing. And then I'm looking at the conductor, and I'm thinking, like, how are they feeling this? And where do they, you know, because they've studied the score, they've studied the overall arc of the whole piece. How do they see me fitting into this? And what's interesting is when a conductor asks you to play a solo that you've played probably, you know, you've practiced playing many years of your life, and they ask you to do it in a different way. And for instance, would be Brahms 1. Jopfinsfaden had a clear idea of how that call goes in the fourth movement. And he wanted it, he just had a vision in his head. He wanted it to be like a Hungarian, you know, melody. And, you know, Brahms was really influenced by Hungarian music. So he wanted it with a little bit of vibrato and intensity. He wanted a space before that first note, and he wanted almost like a snap. And then, you know, and I was used to going, right? So I was used to going to that concert G, and he really wanted me to go to the concert E. So it was really interesting for me to have that way of thinking about this solo. And he'd go, no, that is not right. It has to be more Hungarian. You have to talk like a Hungarian, put the emphasis on the first syllable. And you know, he asked in front of the orchestra, he's working with me, just having me do it again and again and again. And, you know, in those instances, it's like, okay, let me think about this. Let me hear you sing it again. Okay, let me take it home and work on it. And I had to like retrain myself a new way to think about that solo, because it wasn't intuitive. But at the end, I felt like I learned a new way to play that solo, and it was me being flexible to that. And that's, you know, again, everyone knows that solo. I've played it countless times, but, you know, not like that. So I'm so glad I got to do it that way, because it's another, you know, another character in my whole portfolio. It's another tool in my portfolio to be flexible. And then you're just listening around the orchestra and like hearing inspiration from other musicians. Like I get inspired by listening to Steve Williamson, who's principal clarinet, every time I'm in, every day. And he could be playing a solo, he could be playing accompaniment, he could be just playing like little like eighth notes. And everything he does has intent. You know, it's just like every note has meaning. And when I hear him do that, I'm just like, man, let me try to do that. Let me see, what is he doing that? Okay, let me see if I can do that to this note. Does every note have intent? Am I taking like risk on this eighth note passage, you know, that's like, you know, just accompaniment or like, you know, repeated eighth notes. And when I can do that, I'm like, yeah, I'm like getting inspired by what I hear around me. So it's never boring. It's never the same. And it's a living, breathing organism. And it's like, it relates because we all have the same feelings day to day that the composer did when he was writing those melodies.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. Do you mind if we open it up for some questions from the gallery here?
Yeah, please.
Anybody want to kick us off with a question? You're all too bashful. Come on.
You can write them in the chats as well.
There you go.
If they want to, you know, keep it anonymous or just kind of have it a little bit more. It's tough. Like I'm sure they're wondering, like, oh my gosh, you know, you're on stage with the Chicago Symphony, and I'm, you know, like sitting here in horn studio class. How do I get there? And it's like, well, you know, was I born with a special, unique ability? And I absolutely wasn't. I mean, I can tell you honestly, like, the one thing I do have is a love for music, right? And I think the amount of, as far as I've gotten in music is just because that's how much I love it. And when you love something, you're willing to sacrifice for it. I mean, Jonas, you're a parent, right?
I'm not, no.
You're not? Okay. Well, you're an uncle or you know, friends that are parents.
And I've got a small dog,
so,
Kiwi, so sort of a parent.
There you go. There you go. So, you know, when you love something, you're willing to do things for it, right? Like It's like you love that dog and you're willing to take it on walks. You love that dog, so you're willing to, like, you know, go in the backyard and clean it up its, you know, mess. Or you're willing to, you know, go out to the grocery store and, you know, maybe you'd rather stay inside, but you know, and where it's safe, but you got to go get it some food. So you go to the grocery store and put yourself at risk. And that's how I feel when I play the horn. It's like, I love it so much. I'm willing to sacrifice so I can play, and, you know, I'm willing to do what it takes to do it. Okay. We have a couple questions here coming in.
Yeah.
Ask some questions in this chat and we'll get through them. Hey, thanks, Jonas. That was the first question. How do you approach the entire audition process? Anywhere from prep to day off. Day of, excuse me. So when I approach an audition, the first thing is to look at the list. I mean, sometimes they're not available right away, but I remember, like, the very first thing is, like, I have to submit a resume. So I remember seeing, like, associate principal horn of the New York Philharmonic. That was open for a while when I was on the audition circuit. I remember, like, when it first came open, I was like, there's no way I can play associate principal in the New York Philharmonic. I'm just not ready for that job. But I submitted my resume anyways because I figured the only way I can get ready for a job like that is to audition for a job like that. And eventually, if I'm sitting in the job like that, I'll learn how to do a job like that, right? So it was like one of those things, like, I don't know how to do it yet. Put me in and I'll figure it out. And so I'll act as if, right? I'll act as if I know how to do it, and I'll show up and I'll learn, and then I'll be able to do it, right? Eventually, it won't be acting as if, I'll be acting like I'm doing the job because I'm doing it. So submitting the resume, no matter what, that's the first step. And then when I get that list of excerpts, it's like, okay, so how do I organize myself? Because it might be a really long list of excerpts. It might be like, you know, for Chicago Symphony, it was 28 full pieces and 2 concertos. So how do I organize myself, my time? And then I figure out the date. Okay, the date for Chicago Symphony was generally in February or January. And now I've got these audition dates, and I'd usually find out somewhere in October or November. So now let's, like, go out. All right, so I've got 28 full pieces, and I've got 2 months to learn them. Let's just say that. So what are my biggest fires? What do I need to prioritize? And that's always hard for me, like, what's important, what's not. And the more experience I have, the more I learn what's important to work on and what's kind of like secondary and what's tertiary, those kind of things. So the first thing that I know I'm going to probably have to play is the exposition of the Mozart, and then I'm probably going to have to play the exposition of the Strauss. So I know I'm going to need to work on those. So I'm going to work on those every day. And it was really important for me to kind of figure out a quick, efficient method for getting better. There are 2 things that you can lose an audition for: not being able to play in time, like not keeping a steady beat, not counting, like, you know, not playing what's on the page, right? So if you have a whole note, you play 3 beats instead of 4, that's, you know, instantly, you know, a mistake that everyone can notice, right? So, and then if I'm playing that whole note and I'm just wicked out of tune, and there's a ring in the hall, and, you know, like, I played a note before that's like a perfect 5th, and I'm clearly out of tune with myself, then, you know, that's not going to be something that is going to help me. So I had to figure out, all right, if I'm playing in time and in tune, then I've automatically kind of taken care of those objective things, right? Like those things that are non-negotiable. They're yes or no's. Like, is it in tune? Yes or no? Is it in time? Yes or no? So, and I can't do those all at once, and I can't do them fast. So the first thing I'll do is I'll take a line, I'll practice like 4 bars. Just for instance, if we're gonna do Mozart 4, I'd hold a concert E flat. And then play along with that concert E flat. So I want to get those notes in tune with themselves, right? So the fifth is going to be a little bit high, the third is going to be a little bit lower, and I've got the drone going on while I'm playing those. So I'm not really worried about playing in time right now. I'm just worried about playing in tune. And then once I start to get those notes where they're in tune, now let's add some time. So I'll start adding some subdivisions. Da, 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 and so on and so forth. So we'll do 16 notes. And then once I get those 16 notes, they do two things. They add rhythm, but it also adds musical intention. So I can lead through every 16 note and go somewhere or come away from. So I'm always going somewhere or coming away. And then lastly, I'm working on the tempo. I'm adding the tempo up, and then I'm adding in the details. So if I have an accent, I'll add the accent in. Make sure I'm doing that. If I have a crescendo, I add the crescendo in it. Make sure I'm doing that. If I have slurred marks or articulation things or retardando, I'm making sure I add that in. And then I work this 4-bar phrase up from like no tempo, in tempo slowly with subdivisions, and then gradually working it up, adding the details and adding the music. And then basically I work from slow to fast, and I'll work it up, 5 beats per minute at a time or 10 beats per minute at a time. And then I've got this 4-bar phrase, which is now in time, in tune with musical intention, and it's got all the details. It sounds like a lot, right? But if you're working slowly, you can accomplish so much more than if you work fast and are just trying to play through excerpt after excerpt after excerpt after excerpt. So that way I know that I worked on those 4 bars and I never have to come back to them. They're fixed, right? So then I can move the next 4 bars and the next 4 bars and the next 4 bars. And eventually I have one excerpt. And this process usually takes me about 45 minutes to do one excerpt, as long as Brahms 3. But what I've learned is in that 45 minutes, I've checked off one excerpt. So now one of my 28 pieces, the main excerpt from that 28 pieces is done. And that's also a first round excerpt. So I've just checked off, now I only have 27 pieces left to go through. Now let's go through Beethoven 6. And I'll work on the first half of Beethoven 6. Then I'll work on the second half of Beethoven 6, like, the solo. So I'll work on that first half. And then after the whole note, and then, so those are the 2 halves of the excerpt. Work on those, no time, and then with subdivisions, and then work it up. And then, so I've got in time, in tune. Now I'm doing the details. Now I've got those 2 halves, and then I work that, and then we're done. Never have to come back to it again. And then I go to the next excerpt. So the last movement, I could probably get that done quicker than most because it's a repeating arpeggio. And so now I can fix Beethoven 6 in like a half hour, 45 minutes. Now I'm down to 26 pieces, right? So I'm just chiseling away at that list. And it's like, think of the David or some famous sculpture. It's just a hammer and a chisel and a block of marble. And we're just taking rock by rock off of this and gradually finding our statue inside of that. You can come out, and you just trust that you've done the work on that excerpt, and you go to the next excerpt. And then the more you do that, the more you realize I have less to do. But I find my priorities first. So I find those first round excerpts, and then I go into my second round excerpts, and I go into my third round excerpts. So first round excerpt would be like Tillenspiegel, Brahms 3, Midsummer Night's Dream, maybe Beethoven 6, Beethoven 7, Bach Trio, Brandenburg, like for a first round audition. And then second round audition excerpt would maybe be like Pavan, maybe it would be like Heldenleben opening or Shostakovich 5. Well, those are kind of first round excerpts as well. It'd be something that's a little bit longer, like Beethoven 8 or maybe Tchaik 5. Those are good second round excerpts. So, and then, you know, like thinking about the final, like what would they want to hear? Like long call. That's something I'd want to hear in an orchestral final. So, you know, I'm just kind of chiseling away at those. And my first round excerpts are my priorities. And then my second round excerpts are my second priorities. And then I just move the priorities to the done. And I just gradually start moving them over. Like, and then pretty soon you're through the whole list. And then when you get to the week before, practice going through those excerpts slowly, just starting them slowly. Go through it like half tempo. Make sure that the details are still stuck. You're in time, you're in tune, got all the details in there. And this works for everything. This is now how I practice my music for orchestral performances. I work on, you know, 4-bar chunks, 8-bar chunks, in time, in tune with details. And then I go to the next line, in time, in tune. Because, you know, really, this kind of practicing is just efficient. And then I'll go to the next piece. And then go to the next piece. And then once I go through those pieces for that week, I'll play through them a couple of times with the recording. Like, it doesn't have to be Chicago Symphony. I can go through like Berlin Philharmonic recordings or Montreal Symphony recordings, whatever recording I want. And then I go through that and I'm playing along with an ensemble and I'm listening. Who am I playing with? What's coming up before this solo? What does it feel like to count 8 bars rest and then come in on this, you know, this solo? And so now I've got like some practice going through it. And then I practice trying to like go through it and not stop. And practice keeping my attention span and not, you know, oh, I'm going to go text my friend or whatever, you know. So those are ways that I transfer my practice from my audition to practicing in my orchestral job.
Can I just follow up on that with one quick question before we get
Sure.
to the next one? You mentioned today a couple of times, and I know you mentioned it in the warm-up that you put up on YouTube, a lot about slow practice, a lot about using a subdivision. You talked about using a drone, things like that. I mean, is this something that is part of, like, has always been part of your practice? Like, is this something that you really committed to once you became a professional? Like, how did this become such an important component of your daily work?
Well, I think when I was younger, I practiced everything fast, right?
Can you say that one more time? Louder.
When I was younger, I practiced everything fast. And it's like, you know, as a kid, you want big, flashy, red fire truck, loud, you know, that's what I wanted, right? Something like big and flashy. And I was impatient and I wanted to be there yesterday. And what I learned is like, hey, by practicing things fast and trying to cram and rush the process, I'm actually having to play through these things again, and I'm actually having to play through more, and I'm actually wasting more time. So there came a point where I was sick and tired of getting a result. And the result was not getting out of the prelims, not moving up to that next orchestral job, you know, just things like that. So when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? Like when the pain of remaining the same is greater than the pain of change, will change. And I had to admit, like, my timing sucks. Like I don't have good rhythm. My intonation really isn't good. It's not consistent. And I just wasn't, you know, my ego wouldn't let me go there. Like I was like, okay, I'm at this point where like I should have, I have a big job in an orchestra. I'm like principal horn in Dallas Symphony. I should have good time. Okay. I'm playing with, you know, great players. I'm principal horn. I should have good pitch. And what I realized is like, yeah, I've got pretty decent ears, but I'm not super consistent. Okay. I've got pretty good time, but it's not consistent. And so I had to start getting honest with myself and saying, hey, like, what am I going to do to fix this? And do I want to fix it? And so I had to get creative. Like, So yeah, I realized that I wasn't getting the result that I wanted, which was getting out of the prelim of the Chicago Symphony finals. Or, I mean, sorry, Chicago Symphony principal horn audition. So I was in the prelims in 2015, and I didn't make it out. And it was like a big slap on the face to me, because quite honestly, I wasn't doing the work the way that I needed to do the work to get, and get the result that I wanted. So I had to have kind of a moment where I said, like, all right, now listen, do you want to be a principal horn of a major orchestra? Well, or do you want to stay in Dallas? Is that where you want to be? How much does this matter to you? And if it matters, what are you going to do the work? What are you going to do to change to get the result that you need? And I said, okay, I really want to get into the final round of the Chicago Symphony principal horn audition. And I remember thinking, okay, so I need to work on my time, and I need to work on my intonation. So how am I going to do this? And this is where I came up with this method. Like, I got to break it down to the lowest common denominator, because when I play things at tempo, I'm really not, I'm not smart enough to hear all of these things in real time. I'm not quick enough to make that adjustment in real time. I don't have a good enough memory to remember while I'm playing and observing, like, this note was out of time. So I wasn't able to make those corrections in real time. So I slowed it down. And then I realized, hey, I can't actually fix the pitch while there's tempo. And so I took it out of tempo, and I just fixed the pitch. And then I was like, okay, now let's start adding the tempo back and starting to work on, my subdivisions and trying to get things more in tune. And I remember, the real kicker, the kick in the pants was I went to Berlin, and I was just kind of going to play some recitals, before getting ready for that audition. It's like, hey, it's going to be fun. They only have Mozart 4 and Strauss 1. This is how easy is that? Like, this is the easiest audition I've ever taken. Principal horn, Berlin Philharmonic. And so I went and played for my teacher, and I remember him saying, like, hey, you're not doing the work. Like, if you show up like this, you're not going to win. I remember him thinking, like, ouch, that hurts. Like, but he was honest. Like, he said, like, hey, like, if you want that, you need to do the work, and you got to show that you're willing to do the work the right way. And so, like, he said, otherwise, just take a vacation. And I was like, shoot, he's right. Yeah, why am I going to this audition if I'm not practicing? And I think I was scared. Like, I was scared to look at the things that I didn't do well, and I was scared to have to confront these things in my playing, because it meant that, like, hey, I don't have good pitch. Hey, I don't have good time. And so I started, like, breaking those things down, and I started noticing rapid improvements just by addressing them and looking at them square in the face. And then I realized the slow practice was a way for me to make quick progress. I'll say that again. Slow practice makes quick progress. And so I like, quick results, especially when I have a lot of stuff to do. And yeah, when I showed up to Berlin, I was like, okay, I think I'm on to something here. Like, after I won Berlin, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely on to something here. And then when I showed up to New York, I did that for the New York Phil audition. I got a trial for principal horn in the New York Philharmonic. And then I was like, okay, now I'm really onto something. I know I just need to do this consistently for the Chicago Symphony audition and spend 3 hours a day just, doing that, like moving excerpts in a structured manner from one. And I worked for about 6 weeks on that audition. I played all the excerpts together with the recordings. And then I took those excerpts, and then I took the whole piece, right? So I played the whole piece with a recording, and then figured out where I was, got it in my ear. And then I took these excerpts, and I just went, systematically through one excerpt, boom, done. Next excerpt, systematically, boom, done. And, I took my biggest fish, and I felt like once I had some results from that slow practice, there was like no turning back. I was like, okay, I have results of what the difference is. If I do slow practice, I can, get trials in these big orchestras. And that's what I want to do. So I'm willing to do the work, even if it's not comfortable.
Looks like we've got a fair amount of questions. Alicia asked, what advice would you give yourself as an undergrad or grad student?
Oh, man. I would tell myself to listen more, have classical music on. Just doesn't matter if you have a score in front of you, just listen more. Get those sounds in your ear. And I would tell myself to learn, go through like the major pieces, like Mahler 5, Mahler 3, with the score and with my part, and then Brahms 1, 2, 3, Beethoven 6 and 7. Like that's it, right? Those 7 pieces, and then I'd start branching out. Bruckner 4, Mahler 9, Beethoven 3, Beethoven 2, and then I'd start branching out even more, and just go through, like, start to learn those pieces, get them in your ear. Ask questions, like listen to other horn players and ask them how they do things. I would have a practice routine, like a warm-up routine that I would do every day, and then I would want to do recitals. I would try to be doing more chamber music, and I would try to be doing more horn and piano music. And then don't feel like you have to wait until you're ready to take an audition. Just start taking auditions, because you'll become ready after you do it. You're never going to be ready. You're never going to feel ready when you're, I'm never ready to audition for the Chicago Symphony, but I'll walk through that feeling anyways and audition for the Chicago Symphony. And afterwards, I'll be ready. It's like, don't wait for the feeling, act first.
Catherine asked, in addition to your warm-up, what technical skills do you make sure to address every day?
Scales. So I do slow scales, and I just like listen to myself in those scales, and I just listen to my sound. Back down 2 octaves, and then I'll go back up 2 octaves. It's just those slow scales where I'm adjusting the pitch and trying to find the center of the notes are super important. And then I also do stamp stuff, like doing that, I'm trying to find the center of the note, and I'm trying to also so I'm doing something simple. It's a simple exercise, but if I can sing in my head while I'm doing that exercise, then the horn just becomes an extension of what's in my head and what's in my voice. So I'm singing through my brain as loud as I can, thinking, what tone do I want? Where do I want to go? How do I want those slurs to happen? And the horn becomes kind of irrelevant. It just becomes this extension of my imagination. And also it's strengthening my lip, and it's opening up my sound, and it's doing a whole lot of good stuff. So that's something I do every day, generally speaking. But now I don't have to do that so much for the orchestral job. So what I'm doing is, like, I I just find something I want to play, find something I love to listen to, just find something I want to play, and just try to play through it. And then if there's something you want to improve on, do it a little bit better. Practice it.
Durham asks, what makes a great second, third, or fourth horn?
Man. So when I'm playing in the section, I mean, one of the joys of playing second horn for me was that I could always make the first horn player sound really good. And that like, I had to sacrifice my ego and just say like, hey, like this isn't about what I want to do musically, but this is about like, hey, how this person hears the music. It's about me getting into their sound. It's about me getting into their phrasing. It's about me getting into their intonation, and like trying to like become this like horn duo that's like better than just one. And it's like so much fun to like lose yourself in that. And then as a third horn player, there are more moments of solo playing, but I also find that there are moments where you have to figure out, okay, how do I help carry the section in 2D spots so the principal horn doesn't have to blow their lip? How do I, do my solo playing and complement the first horn? How do I do my solo playing in the Brahms symphonies, which might be more of a solo part than the first horn line? So it's like, those kind of balancing moments where it's like fun to like learn a new role, but ultimately listen more and sacrifice what you want for the greater good, right? It's like all for one and one for all. And when I listen to that, even as a principal horn player, I sacrifice what I want. If I hear something that the conductor wants, or I hear something that's going on around me, I'm trying to adapt and change and be flexible. So that's kind of like what I can do to be a better section player.
Great. Catherine asked, do you ever experience burnout?
Do I ever experience burnout? Burnout for me is just like, hey, like, yeah, it's real. Yeah, like after taking auditions, like I'm just like, I put everything I can into like becoming the best I can, training for that day and trying to maximize and trying to peak by that moment. And I find that it's really great for me to like go back to the things that I love, right? Like before this COVID virus, I was really just like, preparing every week like it was an audition. And we just gotten off this intense European tour where every night we're in a different city, and I'm trying to play every piece on principle so I can show the maestro that I'm really committed to him and I'm really giving my all. I'm trying to like be in the moment. And then after the tour, we had an opera, like we did Mascagni, Cavalleria Rusticana, and I had to like, okay, let me like, prepare this like it's going to be like every note's an audition piece. And, for me, playing with singers is the ultimate sacrifice because it's never about you in those moments. It's about the singer. It's about the text. It's about the story. And so I have to wait for these singers to say their thing and do their drama, and then, come in and be a supporting member. And it's really dependent on what they want to do. So, yeah, that's exhausting. And then right after that, we were recording 2 of the Beethoven symphonies. And maestro's really, has a clear vision of what he wants, but that doesn't include like being a solo horn or brass section. He wants the horn and the brass to be like part of this whole. So for me, it's like, okay, like, I got to sacrifice how I've always done, these Beethoven symphonies, Beethoven 5, and what else did we do? We did Beethoven 5 and Beethoven 2. And, it was really tough. It was like, and then right after that, we go into like this Sibelius concert. And that was really fun because it's again, huge horn lines. And then right after Sibelius, I forget what we went in, Brahms 2 with Herbert Darmstadt. I was exhausted, you know, but like, you know, you keep giving because that's what we do. And I'm looking forward to playing like Mahler 6. So I was like tired when the whole COVID thing was starting to happen. And we were coming up to Bolero and Ravel G piano concerto the week that COVID happened. And we were right before the concert. It was like 6 p.m. We get this email saying, hey, we're going to be off for the next 30 days because of COVID. I remember thinking like, you know, wow, I get 30 days off. Okay, how am I going to use this time? And that's when I was like thinking like, yeah, hiking, yeah, go out in nature, because nature fills up my tank. Being outdoors, like being in the woods, it's a way for me to kind of like get away from screens, get away from deadlines, get away from demands, and just focus on being in the present, like the sound of the birds, or the trees that I'm in, or the trail that I'm on, and the people that I'm hiking with, the food that I'm making, the camp spot that I'm going to. It's like it becomes all about the moment, and it takes a couple days, and then I'm reset. I've hit that reset button. And, you know, at that moment, I was like, the last thing I wanted to do was like do transcriptions. I didn't really want to do that, but, you know, it was like, okay, like, hey, I trust that someone in my life has something better for me, you know, knows me. And I trust that, like, hey, it's, you know, just because I'm tired doesn't mean I'm not going to keep giving. So, yeah, I redirected my energy from orchestral playing to solo playing. And it's been amazing. It's been fun and, you know, rewarding and fulfilling. And, you know, and then I started doing these interviews with people on the fireside chats, because I can't play, but I want to give back and I want to communicate. So, like, let's share our story through words instead of music right now, and talk about music and talk about why we love it, and hear the stories of, you know, playing, and hear some backstage stories and some inspiration from these great musicians that I admire, and then, you know, keep giving back. So that was something that I was able to do. Like, and so I just redirect my energy and find things that I'm also passionate about, and yeah, redirecting and re-energizing. And then when I come back, you know, I've taken a break from orchestral playing for a couple of months now, and man, I miss playing. I really miss my colleagues. I miss my home section. I can't wait to get back to that. So, you know, when I'm burnt out, let's just find new things I'm passionate about, right? Like, maybe I'm tired. Maybe I haven't eaten well. Maybe I'm not working out enough, or my body's not in good physical shape. So let's find new things that I'm energized about, and let's switch our focus now to this.
Oh. You mentioned, you know, doing this. You've been doing a number of other ones like this. You mentioned the fireside chats you've done with, I think, your longtime predecessor, Dale Clevenger, who held that seat for 40-something years, and a number of other really prominent people. And I'm curious, I mean, we don't know each other, but we talked briefly last week, and you volunteered to come and spend some time with us. And I know you've done a number of other things. Can you just talk about, like, you said, giving back? I mean, the idea of just being involved in our lives today, and other people's and other experiences you have. Like, I mean, why choose to do that now? And like, what is it about that that's important to you?
Well, I think we're all struggling to find meaning, right? It's a lot of our meaning comes in what we do, and a lot of us can't do what we do right now. And for me, it's like, hey, just because I can't play the horn in public doesn't mean I am. If I couldn't play the horn starting from right now, I still need to find value in who I am. And I need to find meaning, and I find that the most meaningful thing I can do is be of service. It's just to give back, right? It's like that connection with another person, that connection with another player. It's those are the moments where I'm not thinking about God, when am I going to get back to playing with, when am I going to get these concerts? And I'm not just doing like, oh, and I'm thinking about like, how can I best help these people? How can I best be of service? And now it's like my things that are on my brain aren't in my forefront right now. I'm thinking of this other person, and when we share ideas and when we share thoughts, it's joyful, right? It's like, I don't know, I find that pain shared is pain lessened. Joy shared is joy doubled, right? And if we can talk about these things that inspire us, and it inspires me too. It's like, yeah, that's why I'm doing this. I'm like doing this because I love to play. I love to communicate. Yeah, okay, now that's why I'm going to go and I'm going to work on my craft a little bit more and try to find ways to hone in my technique so I can communicate better. And what do I want to say and how do I want to say it? These are the reasons that I keep coming back to the horn. And so when I talk about it, I get re-inspired myself. Now, I find right now that I'm in such a blessed position. I'm with the Chicago Symphony. While we don't have concerts for the foreseeable future, they are paying us until April 26th. And so I feel a real calling to be of service right now. It's like, hey, and then afterwards we're going to get partial salary, and then after that, who knows, but for how long, but let's be of service, right? So I don't have to worry about finances, but I also don't have the same responsibilities with my job. So how can I be useful? How can I be of service? And how can I give back? So I know that there's a lot of players who are struggling financially. And I know that there are a lot of students who don't have access to teachers. And I know that there are a lot of students who don't have access to ensembles. So if I can, offer my experience, my hope, my enthusiasm, if I can do that and I can build somebody up and I can say like, we can keep going today, just for today. We can keep going. We can practice a little bit. We can get a little bit better. We can make this a little bit more about progress, not perfection, right? And just today, someone, says, you know what, I'm going to practice 15 minutes because I know David's like, got this idea about playing a Bach convention. I want to try that. Or, I want to try transcribing this Frank Sinatra tune. So, if I can help some younger student right now that might not have access to me, number one, because of finances, number two, because of distance, because of the quarantine, I'm all about making this available for everybody and trying to bring people together and trying to find meaning and hope and trying to find inspiration. So when you said, hey, I'm loving your videos and I found something that you do kind of inspirational, it's like, all right, sweet, this is an opening for me to be of more service. Let me offer, if you like this video, maybe I can help in another way. Maybe I can talk about my love of playing and what I'm doing right now to stay motivated and to stay kind of hopeful. So I've been offering this to anyone that asks or anyone that kind of comments to me that has a group of horn players. I'm like, man, I did a masterclass yesterday for Costa Rica. Some of the guys in Costa Rica that wouldn't have access to me even when we are playing, because of my schedule or because of, cost of flying me down or, whatever, and it's like, no, we're all in this together right now. And I feel like all rising tides float ships. And it's like a little ripple in the pond. You do something good, it's going to spread to someone else. And they're going to do something good. And it's going to spread to something else. And this is what I can offer. I offer my horn playing because it's it's something I love and it's something I hopefully am knowledgeable about. So through the horn, I'm able to give back to a community and give back to people, which are ultimately the most important. It's their lives at stake right now. There's people, who might not be feeling hopeful. We all struggle with it from time to time, day to day. But ultimately, when you guys reach out to me, you guys are helping me, right? You guys are, being there and you're saying, hey, like, what you're doing is valuable. Who you are is valuable. And it's like getting me out of myself. And I thank you guys for having me. It's like, this is the gift, getting to spend an hour with you, and getting to talk to your students and to, hear like where they're at, what they're going through. So that's really it.
Well, we thank you. I think I can't think of a better way to end on other than on that. And you just nailed the high note there. It's really awesome to hear what you have to say and your experience, and with the energy in which you present and the passion which you are excited about what you do. I think it hopefully is a motivation for all of us to just find the same energy and excitement about whatever it is we're most passionate about. I would say thank you on behalf of everybody. I think we can probably all unmute and say thank you if we want. Yeah, there we go. I would love, because I can do it, I know how, which is really exciting for me with technology, if we could like take a picture, and so there we go. Look at all your smiling faces. All right, so 3, 2, 1, smile. Yay. All right.
Jonas, if you wouldn't mind, feel free to share this video with anyone, everyone. And, I'm happy to post it on my YouTube as well if you send me a copy of it.
Great. Yeah, so, I will do that.
Thank you so much, Jonas.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your time.
We'll see you soon. Look forward to hearing from you. Okay, thank you. Stay safe and healthy, everybody. Bye.